Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Hey, Franchise Secrets. Today's guest is Jonathan Hill with Morrow Hill. We talk a lot about retail site selection. We talked about master brokers, why that may or may not be the best thing for franchisors to do. The approval process, why it's different from what a landlord sees as an approval process for franchisees versus the franchisee and the franchisor. The underwriting process with all of that. How to present your brand to the real estate community. So franchisors, how do you do that? How do you set up your franchisees for a successful site selection journey? Technology. How does technology come into play during site selection? So we got into really tactical things that anybody that is going to sign a lease should absolutely hear about. We talked about personal guarantee stuff, probably things you won't hear anywhere else. The LOI, what to do in the LOI, what it is, what it isn't, and some misconceptions with that, and just some other clauses that should be negotiated. And then also I'd ask them, like, what is a good thing for personal guarantee? How do you know you win? How do you know this is kind of an average personal guarantee and assignment of lease and all of that kind of stuff? So I think this is going to be a really good episode with Jonathan Hill with Morrow Hill. He's a guy that I've gotten to know, and I absolutely love working with this company. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So we were just at Springboard together. We work with you with some of our brands, and I'm like, we need to get you on the podcast so people can start to understand some of the things that you do, because you help franchisors and franchisees a lot. So kind of give us your background and then talk about like what you do for franchisees and franchisors. And then I've got a pile of questions for you.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor. Our organization, Morrow Hill, we've been in existence for 21, going on 22 years. We stepped into the franchise real estate community in 2013. Kind of under the notion that we would place our core values and what made us different and unique, and we would just place it in franchising as we've done in other disciplines and other industries. And a couple of those core differentiators are we exclusively represent tenants, end users, and buyers of commercial space. So that means that we don't have any listings of any kind. And so we analyze the options through the same lens that a Z and a ZOR would have. We think that's really important. So no conflict. And then we also were really unique because we operate outside of a chain or a flag or an alliance real estate model. And that just means that we believe more in a philosophy of building what we call dedicated client teams around the brands we serve, and then we scale and we grow with them. Think of us at a high level as a national real estate organization or an outsourced real estate department for franchisors. And then we guide their franchisees through that whole process from start to finish as they evaluate brick and mortar options around the country. And we also have our own technology platforms that are proprietary to us that we develop to open up better lines of communication and to plot out how a brand will grow around the country as well.
What are you not?
What are we not? We are not a traditional real estate model in the sense that we are not what's called a master broker real estate model. That means that we don't take transactions and then or franchisees rather, and then sub them out around the country to other people who could be either in a network or out of a network. We don't do that. That model has been around for many years. We are disrupting it. It was created, as a matter of fact, in 1976. So quick history lesson, 1976, that model was created. 1975 was the first time in a commercial real estate transaction that a tenant and or a buyer was recognized and having representation. So 1976, 1977, a master broker model, and that was born, and that carried us through to the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, around the introduction of the first iPhone in the summer of 2007 into the financial crisis of 08 and 09. That's when we really saw technology level the playing field and propel companies like ours to really offer a completely different experience. And we are fortunate in the franchising world. We've been welcomed with open arms and have a lot of franchisors that have come over and are happy with our model.
All right. So site selection is such an important piece to a franchisee. And sometimes franchisors just give them a little bit of a playbook and say, go find some locations and give a little bit of help along the way and say, work with your local broker, find one and go for it. And here's some criteria. Others say, here's a master broker and this is a relationship that you have to use. And then there can be complications with that or challenges with that. So I'd love to kind of go through the whole site selection process from your perspective. And at the same time, let's speak to the franchisee and the franchisor, because this is the beginning of everything. And real estate is incredibly important, and times are always changing with that. So where do we start with the site selection process? What should the mindset be, and how does a franchisor go about it?
Yeah, so obviously a franchise, or let's take it from the top. A franchisor has an option of a couple different things, really. They could create their own real estate department. That's an option. I'm not saying it's a bad option. It's an option. It could be a very expensive option, but it is one. You have the master broker aforementioned model, right, where you take those transactions and then sub them out. Pretty difficult to do with a lot of franchise organizations, and we really find it has to do with money. It has to do with commission disputes and the fact that there's really not a lot of money there on a transactional basis. So you do find that as a difficult model for a lot of ZORs to pull off. And then you have our model, which I spoke to.
So let's talk about those two first before we get into yours. So the reason that franchisors would choose a master broker model is it's really nothing out of pocket for them necessarily. The master broker gets paid on a deal when the lease is signed or money exchanges hands. And then they have some type of split with the local commercial real estate leasing agent that does the deal. And there's just too many hands in the pot is what makes that a little bit more challenging. Some of these brokers don't want to give up commissions because they're like, what kind of value are you bringing as a master broker? They don't see the value necessarily. But the franchisor does not want to have, like you said, it could be an expensive real estate team at the corporate office kind of guiding the franchisees through that. So to sum that up, this is my perspective. Let me know where I might be right or wrong. Franchisors don't want to have an expensive real estate team because they're not ready for that. It's not in the budget. They could spend money elsewhere that's more useful to the franchisees, yet they still need real estate help. So they use the master broker model where the money's coming out of the commissions, and that may or may not be the best thing for the franchisee. Did I sum that up fairly well?
Yep,
poke some holes in that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, so as it trickles downstream, what you have is typically a slower real estate process because you have varying interpretations of what the value proposition of the brand is or isn't. You have commission disputes and arguments, right? And you also have a hard time sometimes finding the proper professionals to actually work on it. So you end up with many individuals who are very green and don't have a lot of transactional experience under their belt because they're kind of grasping at people that would want to work on that. Brokers are human like anyone else, and they want to work on something that's greater. So let's not trick ourselves and think that a 2,500 square foot tenant is going to get unbelievable service from the greatest retail real estate professional in any given anywhere USA. That's salesmanship, and that's likely not going to happen.
So we've got those two models. Franchisor has a team of real estate team at the corporate office. They use a master broker, or there's your model. So go into your model and how the differences between that and the other two.
Yeah. So understanding our model, as we talked about, into the 70s, this was a kind of good old boy cowboy brokerage mentality for many years, and technology has really disrupted that, and we're fortunate for that. But to understand our model, we kind of look at it in three pillars. It's our people, our process, and our technology. our people are comprised at the top of an account director. So every brand has an account director, whether they're going to do 5 locations in a year or they're going to do 200. It doesn't matter. Every brand has that single point of contact. And then funneling up through that are transaction managers. So think of them historically like brokers, right? They're the ones that have the art of the deal, and they're guiding and holding the hand of the franchisee through that entire process. So they become very close with the franchisees. And then funneling up through that are regionalized research and development professionals and analysts. So the research individuals who are in the market, kicking up all the dust, uncovering all the options in the market, hitting every parcel ID, understanding who's not paying rent, who's in default, what options are on the market, and then presenting all of those options. And we do that through technology. And then the analysts are there to help someone understand kind of the science behind a trade area and how to compare and contrast a location against each other, to make sure that they're relying on the data. And we like to say we look at fact-based guidance, not opinion-based guidance. So opinion for many years in this good old brokerage mentality may have been, hey, my wife works out in the shopping center, it's really, really busy, and I can never find a place to park, right? So you should go here. And now we say, well, wait a minute, let's look at mobility data. Let's look at optimal adjacencies. Let's do, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things in tools in our tool chest that we can pull out to help get a Zor to Z comfortable with making those real estate decisions. Process is our next pillar. I'll just touch on that. Process is refined and is customized based on each brand that we serve, right? So that starts from the beginning and the way we onboard brands, but also starts from understanding and entrenching ourselves in what the brand is. We have in-house design that creates customized content that speaks to the value proposition of a brand and speaks to the real estate community, so we can educate them. It talks about areas of how do we work with franchisees? What should we expect of them when we start working with them? Their financials, their resume, their bio. We really want to get to know them because the more we know about them, the more we can make them look great. And ultimately, we want to create a situation where there's competition for tenancy. That's what we really want to happen for the franchisee. And so it kind of starts with a lot of those processes and putting those in place. And again, they're very different for each brand. And then technology is at the forefront of what we do, and we create our own proprietary real estate technology platforms. We have our own analytics company and a whole team of data scientists and engineers on our staff, and so we really use that to help make quicker decisions and open up better lines of communication when we work with Z's and Zors. At a high level, that's our organization and our 3 pillars.
So do you work with the franchisor at the brand level and have that relationship with them? And then franchisees, you end up working with their franchisees like a typical vendor? We do, yeah. And by the way, I despise the word vendor. I like the word partner or team member. But yes, that's how we work with them. Typically, so we work together with franchisors in 2 capacities. Oh, guess what's happening right now, Jonathan? This is that national test. Do you hear it? I hear it. Everyone knows when we that I did not turn off my phone. Wow. Yeah. Should put that on the calendar. Yeah. No. There's a feature on iOS that the governmental alerts. Did you know? So I do now. I thought it was you making me pay for saying the word vendor. I thought I was getting in trouble. I thought you hacked into my phone, so I'd never say that again with you. Yeah, no. I was just teasing, but I do tell all Zors that. I said, don't call us that because we really want to create a connection with the brand. Where were we? So you work with at the franchisor level, you build those, and give us a sense of how many franchisors, or give us a sense what that you can, that's public information you don't mind sharing on the size of your company. Happy to share. We represent north of 100 Zors. We will do between 1,200 and 1,400 franchise real estate transactions in a year. Most of them are leases, although some are purchase sale agreements. Some of them are ground leases and built to suits, depending on the type. Children's education, fast casual restaurants, health and beauty space, fitness for children, you name it. 1,500 square feet, kind of on the low end in terms of size, to I used to say 20, 25,000 feet with some of the family entertainment centers, but
now with the emergence of pickleball, I think we're into the 40s and the 50s now.
I want to talk about pickleball. I love pickleball.
I have pickleball paddles, and they're hanging in my garage, and I haven't used them yet, but I'm waiting for time to use them.
That needs a change.
I do play tennis. And I play a tennis game 105. I'm not very good, but I do play sometimes.
So from your perspective, what kind of inside information do you have on the health of franchisors and just how good the franchisor is? And I'm not trying to get like dirt or inside information that way, but I'm trying to come from the perspective of people out there that are looking at buying a franchise. There are franchise vendors. There are people that are on the outside of franchising that have a different angle than the franchisor that may be able to help you understand what are some of the good brands out there. Lenders are like that. Lenders get to see a lot of stuff with franchise brands. So think about the buyers out there. What should they be thinking about when it comes to real estate? What are some of the things that you guys know or notice that you're like, boy, if the buyers knew this, they may not have bought, or they probably should have bought more?
Yeah, so we unfortunately sometimes get to see some things downstream, and we get handed what we get handed. But I have seen some Zors, and I'll leave them unnamed, but that have been really buttoned up from the very beginning. When I mean buttoned up, I mean investing in things like mapping technology and analytical tools to help propel their frame dev. And oftentimes people look at that as, oh, I don't want that expense. But the ones that I've seen do it just happen to sell more franchises, and there's always a correlation there. And so I think looking out for if you were a franchisee and you are buying into a brand, that's some of the things that I would be asking and look at. What does the real estate process look like? What kind of help do I have? How do you evaluate locations? What locations? Obviously, you're asking the questions on what locations have failed and not failed, but from the real estate perspective, those are some common questions and things that I see come up.
What are some of the common mistakes that franchisors or franchisees make in the site selection process that maybe you've come in after they've done it the wrong way, or you just see it from the outside looking in? What are some of the bigger mistakes that franchisors make when it comes to site selection?
I think sometimes the lack of connection between a real estate team and the fran dev teams can be a detriment downstream to a franchisee, because a franchisee bought an area they should not have bought. And there's a pretty quick fix to that up front, and downstream that could be a much harder fix. So we do consult with certain Zors, leave them unnamed, that do certain territory checks in a certain way that allow us to help guide that process to be a little bit smoother. I think the positive impact you see from that is you see quicker openings and quicker lease executions and a smoother process, mainly just around inventory. And it could be a discussion, the lack of inventory or the lack of your avatars being prevalent in that community. So there's, I think that is an area that I see as a common mistake, and I also see it as a common win for brands that do that in the right way.
Give me some real world examples of that. Where are you seeing inventory that maybe there's not a lot of inventory on the market right now, or there's too much competition, and so there's not a lot of inventory, or for whatever reason?
Yes. So I know this is not something everybody wants to hear. So, but we are in our 10th consecutive quarter of a major lack of retail inventory in the entire country. So we are experiencing a lot more absorption than we are net new deliveries of new space and new products coming onto the market. And the new product coming on the market is somewhat unaffordable for many brands, depending on the genre. So that is a challenge. I'm not saying, and as evidenced by my comments on how much volume we're doing, we're getting leases done every day and we get real estate transactions done every day. But if you are buying a franchise and you think you're going to, see 14 sites or whatever locations or options that you've concocted in your head, and however you came to that conclusion, you may have 4. So you need to be agile, and it is very much a landlord's market. You need to be able to be flexible on your requirements. There's retailers that have just announced their flexibility plans in a recent report through Oxford Economics that came out that I think it was 5 Below that said that they have adjusted their real estate requirement to 20% in terms of their size. So as they normally look for 10,000 feet, they will adjust in either direction or open up some additional inventory. So you need to be flexible.
So as part of this, because people aren't building more centers, and is that because the cost of construction has gone way up? I'm speaking from personal experience. We just dumped $200,000 into some engineering and to get a project to bid in a center that I own, and we realized when all the bids came back, it was not going. We couldn't charge enough rent to make it work right now. Is that common across the country? Is that unique to me? Is that just one of many different factors?
Yeah, really, it's a post-COVID era. You had, let's go back a little bit. You had a lot of sideliners, right? And you had a lot of folks that were waiting out COVID and was building up these entrepreneurs. You had a lot of wantrepreneurs that became entrepreneurs. You had the Great Resignation ensue. You had supply chain issues, construction costs. It was just a perfect storm for the lack of new inventory coming online, and you had a lot more investors or business owners flooding the market, gobbling up this space. So what we call second generation space it's a feeding frenzy. It would not be uncommon on a very attractive shop space, as we call it, to have 6, 7, 8 offers on a space. And I routinely am asked, well, who would win that? Who's going to win it? Brand strength, financials of the Z, the resume, the bio, the operating history potentially of the Z. I mean, there's some what does the merchandising plan of the center look like, and what are they trying to achieve within that center? There's a lot of factors. So we highly encourage. Well, not that we haven't always done this, but now more than ever, you need to have multiple irons in the fire, and to do not place all your eggs in one basket and think that that's going to work out for you, because you could be number 7 or 8 on the list and they never respond to you.
So let's dive into that a little bit more, kind of the approval process. Landlord wants you get picked. Where is the disconnect between what franchisees are thinking the approval process is going to be like, what franchisors are telling them it's going to be like, and the reality out there with maybe different types of landlords, the REITs, the big landlords to the mom and pop landlords. So where are some of the disconnects?
Yeah. So one of the things I see is kind of in the underwriting, so this is way upstream. So the underwriting standards or the approval process, the liquidity requirements, the net worth requirements of a franchisor on a franchisee don't always, I'm not saying this the hard fast, they don't always translate to the underwriting standards of that REIT or that endowment fund, what have you. And so we often find a disconnect there. And I think drawing a benchmark, if I were giving advice to a franchisor, drawing a benchmark to the SBA is not always the ticket. And it's a factor, but it's debt. It's not an asset. And it does hold some strength, but it's not your ace card by any stretch. So I often find an uphill battle with franchisees that are kind of just barely cutting that. And sometimes the fix can be subpar real estate options and decisions, but sometimes that's also not the the answer. And sometimes franchisor may not want to switch to or retreat to that option. So that's something that sticks out to me.
What are some of the expectations? Well, let me rephrase that question. You hear people that say, I'm just doing corporate guarantees. I don't have to do any personal guarantees anymore because I'm using my corporation for personal guarantees, and landlords are letting me do that. How likely is that? And what are some of the maybe questions they should be asking themselves, or things that they should be understanding about getting off the personal guarantee? Maybe it's years in business, maybe it's experience, maybe it's profitability of the parent company that the franchisee is part of. Like, what are some of the things and the ways to get off of a personal guarantee, and how much does it really even matter?
Yeah, so a personal guarantee is just one vehicle to secure the lease. It's a very popular one in franchising just because you have a lot of first-time franchisees or single asset entities that are securing these locations. We have had success in more accredited investors, franchisees that own locations that have pledged entities that own other locations that have a solid P&L and a balance, that have a track record to attach them to other leases. We've seen letter of credits also become a vehicle as popular to try to shy away from any legal advice here, but that get into a way to shield potentially your estate, and so that is a popular thing. The other confusion about personal guarantees, I think, in the franchising or just in retail in general, is that I think that a lot of people think that you have an entity that's signing a lease, and if you reduce the guarantee, you're typically reducing the personal guarantee or the personal liability. That doesn't necessarily mean that entity that signed the lease is off the hook, right? So those are two different things you really kind of have to think about. But reducing personal guarantees and the length and the amount of teeth they have in them is a very common business practice, and something that any reputable real estate brokerage company would do on behalf of a franchisee. But that doesn't always, you got to be very careful. That doesn't always mean that original entity is not still on the hook for that entirety. Sure.
So why would a landlord want to give TI or tenant improvement dollars, and why would they not want to do that and instead do the build out themselves and increase the rent? So what's like someone that's about ready to lease a place, and the landlord has a preference to give a TI allowance or to just do it themselves and increase the rent?
Yes, so there's a couple different schools of thought. One asset manager, whom I know many, may tell you quality control could be a common answer. A way to profit from that endeavor could be another answer, as they amortize those tenant improvement costs into the life of the lease with an interest rate that makes sense for them to do so. That could be a common reason. Sometimes you'll find certain real estate funds that don't want to get into the paper trail of addressing reimbursable expenses related to tenant improvement cost, and they don't want to get tied in with the entire lien waiver process and what that involves. So those could be some common reasons.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my franchisee mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. All right, so from a franchisor's perspective, how can they help present the brand and help that franchisee present the brand to the real estate community? So what are some best practices? What are some areas that they should be really focusing on?
Well, number one, a beautiful brand deck and guide, and walking through the journey of why this brand started. I tripped over a pile of bricks and I started this brand, and and this is what it does. I know that sounds silly, but it's really kind of telling that story and what the value proposition is, and what kind of void is it filling, in the market, and why we think it's going to be successful. We've had franchisees, write a cover letters with their bios and their resumes and talk about an explanation of what they're going to do within the community and how what their strategy is. So it's not just numbers on a pro forma. It's also, hey, this is going to be my approach, and really kind of outlining that and detailing that. So there are situations where you really need to sell yourself and as a new business owner in that area, and sometimes it can feel like a daunting task, I think, to some franchisees that, oh my gosh, this is really an interview process, and in many cases for a quality piece of real estate it is, and you have to acquiesce if you want to arrive there. So I think that that brand guide, I think, kind of prepping and knowing who you're negotiating with is really, really important, and knowing the market conditions, and really preparing, I would say to go to battle, but prepare to be buttoned up as they start looking at you. I think that's really important. I think enthusiasm with, like I see it on our side and within our firm, I see, the enthusiasm with respect to our research and development professionals, that's super important. I mean, hey, I represent this dog concept, and it's very, or, hey, we have this, this is what we're doing, and they're dropping stats and they're getting them excited, and hey, this is what we have in development, and we just opened up here, and this grand opening had 400 people. I mean, we take those nuggets of information from brands and we use that information to build excitement, regardless of what city it's in, to kind of create that bandwagon and get them excited about it. Because the more they're excited about it, they're our microphone, right? They're who we're talking to, the agents on the other side, and we need them to have that same level of excitement when they present it to whoever's managing their asset.
You were talking earlier about accessing data that kind of told you who might be behind on their rent or lease payments and things like that. And I think you said you had some data on that. In the old school days, we would just go out there and knock on doors and see who might not be. We'd ask the neighboring tenants in there, is anybody behind here? Is anybody like struggling here? And that's how we would start to find some locations and whatnot. So give us a sense of how you're utilizing technology to kind of do some of that, not just looking at a listing website or however it works in the commercial leasing side, but diving in to try to find some diamonds in the rough that may not be on the market right now. Yeah.
So commercial real estate has advanced in the way of knowing all the locations, but not knowing advanced yet on knowing the details of the location yet. So you have to have an army of people to do that. So it's working closely, not just with the agents, but also property managers. Many times the opportunities we find have nothing to do and have not even hit what we call that rent roll, haven't even hit the third-party agent's eyes yet. And that's okay. And we're not going around them, and they're still part of the transaction, and we still need them. But this allows us to start tracking some of these organizations, and we do it by brand. Obviously, you read in the media these brands that close, and we follow those disposition assignments closely. But also looking at just individual stores that are behind on rent or that are on a potential watch list. And it's even in today's environment, it's still very much I wouldn't call it a secret society, but it's very much, hey, you have to have that personal communication in that conversation, and let them know what you have and exactly what you need, and make sure that you're one of the first people they call when that's released. And sometimes it is very sensitive information. We also, it's not uncommon to work on a contingency-based letter of intent, a proposal on a location that is not yet on the market, but we know that'll be hitting the market. So that's not uncommon.
Let's talk about LOIs or letter of intent. How robust should they be? Where should you kind of just put in there, hey, to be discussed, in the actual lease? Give us a sense of what you like to see in LOIs, what you don't like to see, and where there's some leeway.
Oh, well, you can see me smiling because this is one of my favorite subjects. I like a very robust LOI.
Yeah, I haven't seen you smiling yet. So finally we hit on something.
Well, we talk about ice hockey and you'll see me get really excited. LOIs, it's a perfect, you got to have a science around it. It can't be too long, but it also can't be, have nothing in it. In franchising, I love a collateral lease assignment or franchise rider attached to it. I've seen people try to
explain that a little bit more.
So the requirements of a franchisor to have rights to that lease upon events that take place in that lease, default, etc. That document that these ORs want, having it as an addendum and exhibit to the LOI is really important, because if you have an internal process with your like with us, with our dedicated client teams, we now know downstream we have a process and how that executed LOI gets to the hands of the counsel that is reviewing it on behalf of the lease, on behalf of the landlord, on behalf of the tenant. And it's a double check to make sure that, hey, we know that it's there. So that's why it's really important that we have that. Work letters, so how we want the space delivered. How are we asking for that? My advice to brands that don't have one is go get one, right? Not all brands are different. What are your power, mechanical, electrical, plumbing requirements? What are they? What do you want? What is your legal description of your brand, right? What is it? That matters for code reasons, right? And your use description. Who do you want to prevent from being in the center, right? Could be competitors in your space, could be a list of undesirable tenants. These types of things are really, really important. Some brands will take it a little step further and assign exhibit. We often see that sometimes a lease could get held up at execution because that wasn't imposed in part of the lease. So that's an important step. I often get into the debate of, should a personal guarantee be addressed to the initial LOI or should it not be? You could flip a coin on this discussion. You really could. Here's one side of it. This is a popular.
No, I'm smiling. You got me smiling now. Let's go.
This is a popular subject. If you send a letter of intent and you address it, the theory on this side of the coin is you may not make it to second base or third base. If you address it later, people would argue that you would slow down the transaction and you create a bump later. My argument to that is you're going to create a bump anyway. It's still going to be a very painful discussion and a point of contention from both parties and need to be something that's addressed. If I were to pick, I'd probably say to address it downstream after you bake the transaction. That doesn't mean after you've advanced it further. That doesn't mean you always have that choice. They may force your hand and call it out, and you need to stop the show and address it.
What's some middle ground on that? Is it like getting somewhat close, but just saying to be defined further in the lease? Maybe it's a 1 year with a 1 year rolling or 2 years and 1 year rolling. I think if you get into the discussion,
you're taking it all the way, or you're either tabling it or ignoring it, or you're going to make it a business point and you're going to be agreeing upon it before the executed LOI, no different than rent or abated rent or tenant improvement allowances or other concessions. It's
Because what is agreed to in the LOI, the landlord signs, you as a tenant sign, that's what goes into the lease. Now, they can backtrack on some of that, right? I mean, legally, it can be like, hey, we don't want to do this. We're giving on this. Let's change this. But in like, you should be ready for everything in that LOI to be put into the lease, both the landlord and the franchisee. Is that right? Where can that argument be wrong?
Yeah. So this is another popular debate. You have a fully executed LOI. You're moving forward. It's non-binding, by the way. Most of them are non-binding, although we have done binding LOIs for different reasons, but not customary to do it. You are moving forward, and I think some individuals think that it's a time, once you learn a little more about the space, it's a time to go back and kind of drink from the fountain again, if you will. I would highly advise against that. I really think the time to drink from the fountain is a misrepresentation of the asset. Let's give an example. Let's tell me there's 30 tons of HVAC up there and there's only 15. You tell me the units are 10 years old and they're 20 years old. You tell me that the sidewalk's ADA, but it's not. Give me something. Now, I'm not saying the art of negotiation can't come in and all of a sudden you find out your build out is $400,000 and you thought it was $200,000, and you go back to the fountain and they really, really want your brand. They have no other options. And you're able to leverage that information and it works out for you. There are many cases where it doesn't work out for you. I often encourage anyone who's at an LOI not to drop their other locations. And that's the art, because you have this weird timing there and you need to hold people at bay as you have proper due diligence performed on the site before and during while you're going through your lease process. And really you want to kind of string along. I know that sounds like a poor ethical decision, but really they're doing it to you. In many
I was going to
cases.
say, they're doing the same thing, aren't they?
They're doing it. Now you got to use judgment calls. I mean, if you had 4 LOIs working, you may drop your other 2 and you keep 2 alive. I mean, you kind of have to draw a balance there, but the deal's not done until it's done. And leases can die at that stage. And so that would be my advice in that area.
Let's continue on the LOI and go back to the lease assignment, because that's another important one. Early on, the landlords want like your personal financial statement and some things like that, the experience that you have and whatnot. And they use that when it comes to the lease assignment. That might be a net worth requirement or experience requirement or something like that. So give us some insight into the games and that's probably the wrong way to say it, but the games that you can play with that. Because there's people probably have different personal financial statements. One they give the bank, one they give the landlord, one they give to, a credit card application. Are they really disclosing everything that they have, or are they having a little bit light? So give us some of your feedback on lease assignment.
Yeah, the lease assignment discussion is a major deal point. I would say kind of right up there with the personal guarantee discussion. It can be. It's those handcuffs, those parameters around what does the party that you wish to assign and or a sublease to, what do they look like? What is their, and so the discussion is not always financials. Sometimes it's what is their business acumen, their resume, their bio, their operating. And so sometimes units, if you're a multi-unit person, a discussion around how many units does the person have to have can come into play. And the more restrictive this language is, the harder it will be for you to exit and sell. And so it's a very touchy subject. This is kind of where also too the underwriting requirements of the brand come into play, because the brand says, well, wait a minute, landlord, you want the net worth of the person that my franchisee is going to assign to be $1.8 million with a liquidity of $700,000, but my standards are 1 million with a liquidity of 300,000, and they don't match. And that's where you get into a debate. So it's very much it's not black and white. It's very much a negotiation, and there's lots of tactics and things that you can do there to get creative. Sometimes time comes into play. So a landlord may say that the franchisee has to stay in the space for X amount of years, and then they're eligible for this event to take place. That can be common. We really do want to stay away from operational and/or unit counts, because that can be very, very restrictive. No different than another popular one you see is the requirement of how close another location of the same brand can be to the location that you're executing on, which is another touchy subject. The landlord says, 2 miles, 3 miles, you go back and forth, and so that's also pretty popular.
What is some good language that a franchisee would say, I didn't get a big win here, but this is good lease assignment language? And by the way, lease assignment doesn't mean you release from the personal guarantee. So, but what is some good lease assignment language that like a franchisee should feel satisfied with?
Yeah, and also it can mean that you're released. We've also done that, fully released. But yeah, thanks for clearing that up. It is common that's a misnomer. I think a lot of people don't understand. They think that when I'm signing out, I'm getting fully out. It could just mean that you're in second position, but you have a position still within the lease document. A popular compromise, is somewhere in our eyes fairly close to what the average for a more mature franchise could be, what the average liquidity and net worth requirements, not what you would approve someone at, but what you've been selling and the type of franchisees that you've been getting into your system. Could be a pretty good compromise. We've had franchisors show that data in an effort to say, hey, these are the suitors of our locations, and we've had some great success with them. So that's why we think you should approve that.
All right. Same kind of question, but around the personal guarantee. And that probably a little bit, I would imagine that's going to have something to do with the amount of dollars that the landlord spent to get the deal done, commissions, different things, and actual dollars getting the space ready for them. So how would you same question, what's a good personal guarantee?
Okay. So you really have to, you're right. You have to look at the dollars at risk for the ownership and what their outlay is. You also have to, which this information you don't always have, but in many cases we can get information around what the basis points and what the position of the ownership is. There's ways to get that. If you know that information, you can back into what they're likely to approve. We have a scale that we often will use to look at what their acquisition outlay cost is based on the total consideration of the lease, and there are some percentages that you would typically find as uncommon to receive approval on the guarantee and being let out of that obligation. A popular guarantee at a high level would probably, if you had a 10-year lease, not uncommon to have a 5-year personal guarantee. Something pretty popular in the franchising world is we call them rolling guarantees. You familiar with this? So could mean rolling 6 months, rolling 12 months, and then that's just the value of what your rent is during that period of time as an exit payment, as a termination penalty, if you will. So that those are pretty popular. And there's certain ownership groups would do a 3-year guarantee, and there are certain regions around the country that have different types of guarantees and recognize things. So the Northeast and areas such as New Jersey and New York would not be uncommon for you to find a good guy guarantee clause, which is a completely different approach. So those are some areas that we would typically see as fairly common.
All right. I love technology. Yeah. Our brands that are working with you, love the technology that you're bringing, and not only helps their franchisees, but it helps in the franchise development process of people understanding who's helping with what. So very good feedback from you guys, from our founders and people that are buying our the brands at Front Street Equity Partners. What technology do you like? Do you love? How, just give us some insight on what you see as technology and how it's helping the franchisees.
Yeah. So obviously we develop our products to tailor to exactly the things that we see. So we've developed them, because we find them to be, most useful to our application, which is in the areas of the way we communicate. Communication tools are really important. There's a lot of moving parts in a real estate process. There's other real estate partners, not vendors, that are part of the process. Sign and companies, brand architects, project managers, real estate professionals, attorneys, franchise development, anyone approving the lease on the franchisor side. So that could be a real estate committee. There's a lot of moving parts there, and so I think at the forefront, a tool that allows them to all communicate efficiently, understand, and make quick decisions is a tool at the forefront for that. So when we first introduced it and when we first started diving into the need for it, we realized that there wasn't anything out there, so therefore we created it. And then the intelligence we have on the way we know how customers move around trade areas and what their buying habits are and the stores they go to, pre and post visiting various locations, and their habits and who are they, and we call them avatars. And then, in our technology, we weight those avatars and those values so we can get really precise in where we want to place locations to predict the success of a location using those techniques. Very common. Mobility data is a big discussion now. A lot of people like to talk about it. There's different types of mobility data. There's broad stroke mobility data, which is very common and what most people are using right now. And kind of look at that like a watermelon. Cut open a watermelon. I think the mobility data now is the white shading inside of the watermelon. The red is all the noise, and then the black seeds are your pinpoint or your customers. So there's different approaches to mobility data, and I don't think it's necessarily just there yet, but it's getting there. My advice to anyone is not everyone has the disposable to get to take on some of the expenses, but I think some individuals would be surprised that there's something out there for everyone, and I think you have to create a system and stick to it. I think that not having a system at all in today's world of technology and the way we evaluate locations is insane. I think that what you use today and as you need to wrap your mind around won't be the same what you use in 12 to 18 months from now. You can adapt and evolve and grow. And what you learn about your customers today will be very, very different than it is tomorrow. So my advice to any organization would be to invest in something now, because I can tell you countless times, I'll hear from prospects, downstream, and the franchise development teams hear this and sometimes don't see this, that, I was hung up on real estate, but they showed me this system and I knew they weren't just throwing spaghetti at the wall, and I had confidence, and I made that leap of faith because of that reason. I think when you see that happen a couple times just in 1 year, it pays for itself 3-4-fold.
So what brands might be too small for you?
You know what? I've learned to say that we really we're really open-minded to working with everyone. I tell the story of a brand called Code Ninjas, and their CEO is a dear friend of mine. So I could say this, that when I heard the word Code Ninjas, I laughed and said, whoa, you're going to teach children how to code? No one wants to learn how to code. I said, maybe your robotics platform. I said, that's interesting. Like my son would do that, but I don't know about coding. And then sure enough, it was a short time later, we were opening up, we're signing 125 of those leases a year. And we were off to the races. So, David, hats off to you. And I apologize for my initial prejudgment. But we're excited we hear new brands, speak to new brands every week, many of them, and constantly, seeing some great things out there. And so we're always excited to hear the stories around how these things get developed, and excited to be a part of the growth.
So how do people find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram, jhill CRE. They can find us at our company's morrowhill.com, and on LinkedIn at Morrow Hill. So, and you can find me at any of the franchise shows. I'm always walking around and meet new people.
Come up and say hi to him. I love it when I go to these franchise shows and people just come up and say, see me on the podcast. They love the podcast or whatever it is. Like, I'm always ready to meet people at these conferences and conventions, and meet other partners. You might see some vendors at some of these conferences, but you also see some partners like Jonathan. Morrow Hill is MORROWHILL. Check it out. Get a call with their team. Like, these guys are amazing. I don't get anything for saying that. I just like to bring good people in here with, I thought you dropped so many good, helpful, tactical things, and at the same time kind of gave a good overview of the whole site selection process. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And hopefully I was able to provide some valuable insight.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.